Welcome back to this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork. My name's Julia Felton and I will be your host and guide for the next 20 minutes or so while we explore everything teamwork. And today's episode has been prompted by what has been happening in the last week. So I like to ensure that I am always at the cutting edge of the latest leadership techniques that are out there. And what can often happen is that as a leadership development consultant and coach and trainer, if I'm not careful, I can just spend all the time in my office not actually implementing everything that I'm sharing with my clients. So usually for a few months over the summer, I tend to go back to my old roots of catering and hospitality. So I've just returned from a week in Paris where I was running a chalet for a large aerospace company that had a hospitality chalet at the show. And I've worked for this company now for about 7 years, so I know them very well. And therefore, I also will have with me a team of associates who obviously look after the guests in terms of waiting and baristering and getting drinks and everything like that. And this team of people are usually early 20s. A number of them I work with, often sometimes back here in the UK. So they are people that I know. And I was part of a contingent. There were probably about 80 of us over there and probably about a dozen managers, each of us running different catering chalets in different ways. And it was just such a great reminder of the fact that leadership is so diverse and so complex, and everybody does it differently. So that's really what's prompted me to do this episode today, because what I see and what I observe is that bad leaders, they think they are invincible. They think they wear the crown. They think they are the ones that are in charge. By contrast, good leaders, they wear a hat. They do a good job. Often they're leading from the front. They're showing people what to do. They don't have a degree of arrogance. Often they're pretty empathetic and compassionate. But what about great leaders? And this is what I observed last week. Great leaders, I would like to suggest that a great leader wears at least 10 hats. And why is this? Why am I saying this? It's because your team doesn't need just one kind of support. It needs the right kind of support at the right time. And that's what great leaders really understand. They don't cling to one identity, they adapt, they serve, and they know when to wear the different hats. So I thought this would be a really apt topic for us to look at this week about what hats a leader wears when. Because getting into the trenches and leading this team of hospitality servers during the Paris Air Show and working with the client, I had to adopt many of these different roles. And it was just such a great reminder to me about how diverse leadership is and how everyone does leadership differently. And that's because each of us embody these roles in different ways. Some of us have a preference for some roles over others. But as a leader, you really need to master as many of these roles as possible, because I think the more that you understand all these different hats that you're wearing, and you can put on the right hat at the right time, that really, for me, exemplifies a great leader. So what are these 10 hats that I'm going to shortlist for you today? And I'm sure there's even more that we could look at, but let's just look at 10 that I experienced this week. And the first of these is the mentor. And what does the mentor do? The mentor is all about sharing wisdom without preaching. They're about guiding and not controlling. And they're about helping people find their own answers. And there were definitely times in the last week where this was my leadership style and the leadership hat I was wearing. This is probably the one I prefer to wear. I really like to help educate and share wisdom with people. And I'm really about helping people find their own answers and give people the space to explore what those might be. The second hat that I had to wear was the coach. And the coach is always about spotting potential in people before they see it in themselves. It's about helping push people when they hesitate, to help people to expand and grow outside of their comfort zone. And it's about investing in personal growth for that person. And in fact, this is something I've just been doing this afternoon, because while I was away in Paris, I've been having a young girl, just 15, coming to look after and keep an eye on my horses for me, along with her mum. And it's very interesting. She's very enthusiastic, but she's not very confident. And so she came this afternoon to have a ride on one of my ponies now that I'm back. And she wants to take some equine exams. So I started to give her a bit of coaching and education on some of the topics she's going to need to learn for her exams. And I think she could be a really amazing equestrian, but she doesn't see it in herself. So there was a little bit of me today that had to push her a little bit out of her comfort zone in order to help her move forward. The third hat is that of the defender. And this is about shielding our team from politics and fighting the battles they shouldn't have to. And it's about protecting them without hovering. And when I think about this role, this was a real role that I had to play when I was leading my team at Arthur Andersen through the Enron crisis, because I really felt like I had to shield the team from a lot of the office politics that were going on and protect them about what was happening within the organization, because there was a lot of stuff that they could have got embroiled with that wasn't helpful and really didn't serve them. And they weren't battles that they needed to fight. They were battles I needed to fight on their behalf. So that's the defender. The fourth hat is that of the translator. And the translator is all about how do we bridge the gaps between levels? And how do we speak the language of our team members, not our own language? And it's quite interesting actually working with a lot of millennials, Gen Z team members, that sometimes they speak a different language to me. And it's interesting how I had to step into their shoes and be able to communicate with them in the way that they needed communicating with, which at times was quite uncomfortable for me, I have to admit, because it wasn't something I was used to. But it's so important that we demonstrate this emotional intelligence. And as leaders, when we put on the hat of the translator, it's all about how do we see the world through somebody else's lens and not through our own. And this is what gives us a bigger perspective on things and helps bring all the diversity of thought into the workplace. The fifth hat is that of the cheerleader, one of my favorite roles. The cheerleader is all about spotting the effort before the result, making sure that we recognize and applaud people in public, and in private, correct any behavior that hasn't been appropriate. So the cheerleader is all about appreciation and making appreciation a daily habit. And definitely this week, the team that I was working with did a absolutely superb job. The client was beyond excited with the results, and we had some amazing feedback from a number of the leaders of the company, the CEO, a lot of the area presidents actually wrote and reached out and said what an amazing job the team had done. So really important that as a leader, we act as the cheerleader, helping raise the energy of the group, making the group realize what a great job they're doing. It makes them more highly engaged. And when they're more highly engaged, they're much more outgoing and friendly. One of the pieces of feedback that I received was how personable the team members were and how they managed to combine the right level of attention to the client without being over interfering. You've got to remember that at this event, my client was there to do a number of big deals in the aerospace industry. So they wanted us to impress their clients by providing amazing service. But we also needed to create that space in order for them to be able to have these discussions, so we couldn't be too interfering. So it was a really fine line to navigate through for everybody. But we did it with really great success. And I noticed that really quickly at the beginning of the week, what was going on. And I was able to help our team members see that was what was happening and what a great job they were doing, and acknowledge them very publicly for the amazing work they were doing. And I've also got to say that my client was absolutely amazing as well about the level of appreciation and gratitude that they showed my staff members. And that made the team feel really motivated. And they went this extra mile to provide this really personal service to my client. So much so that they received some feedback from their senior executives who had been to other catering chalets saying how great the service was in our chalet because of how personal the team was. So the cheerleader, that's a role and a hat that I love to wear. The sixth hat sometimes that we have to wear is that of the therapist. This is a role that's all about holding space for human moments, being the therapist, really listening to team members, show that it's okay not to be okay, and listen before solving. And I had to drop into this role and wear this hat on a number of times during the week. I had a few internal discord between some of my team members. And I definitely had to step into the role of being almost a mediator and a therapist and figuring out for people what was going on and how we could make the situation better for them. That's the great thing about leadership. It's never static, it's always evolving. There's always something different going on. So the seventh hat, how about this of a janitor? It's all about cleaning up the mess without blame. It's about fixing first and debriefing later, and rolling up your sleeves when they're needed. I think great leaders lead from the front. They exhibit the kind of behavior that they want their team members to do. And again, I had to do this on numerous occasions throughout the week when team members were saying a particular task was too complex or it was too heavy to carry a tray of drinks, for example. So I just rolled up my sleeves and I did it. And they're looking at me and they're like, if you can do it, Julia, then I can do it. That's a really important role. And I love this role of the janitor about clearing up the mess without blame. Every time that we work in teams, there are always situations that don't go to plan. And I think a great leader steps into that role of janitor and really sorts things out and oils the machine so it runs smoothly. So they're cleaning up the mess without blame. The eighth hat is that of the student, which is about learning from everyone, admitting when you don't know, and making curiosity contagious. And again, I think I'm always a student. I'm always a student. I always love to learn. And I learned a huge amount last week from other catering chalet managers about the way they did things. I'm not wedded to the way that I do things is the only way to do it. I actually learned a lot from my team members as well, because every evening we'd have a debrief and go, what went well, what could we do differently? And people were coming up with great ideas about ways that we could improve the service. And so I was always a student, always eager to learn and always being really curious about what's possible. The ninth hat that as leaders we often wear is that of the mirror. And as a mirror, what we're wanting to do here as a leader is reflect back to our team members themselves and their best self about how they're doing. We want to show team members their potential, not their limits, so they can see who they're becoming. And I love this idea of being a mirror because this is what the horses do so well. Whenever I run workshops with the horses are always acting as mirrors, feeding back to my clients who they are becoming and how they can see their potential. So the mirror is quite a fun role there to do as a leader. And finally, the final hat that the leader is wearing is the compass. And in these times of uncertainty, the role of the compass is really vital. It's about pointing to true north in chaos, staying steady when others panic, And importantly, reminding team members of why we're doing what we're doing, because there's always a rationale for it. And I think this compass and showing people the way, we've talked a lot on the podcast about getting people all pulling in the same direction. And this is where the leader has to really step into this role of showing where the true north is. Where do we need to go in the chaos? When there's lots and lots of moving parts, somebody needs to step up and set the direction and show people where to go so that people can follow. But of course, people won't follow blindly unless they really understand why. And this is why this is so important. So in summary, leadership isn't a rank or a role. It's about how you treat your people. It's about your service and your support. Everybody for me is a leader. You don't need a promotion. You don't need permission. You don't even need a title. We just need the courage to step up and serve and be leaders for everyone else. And this is because the best leaders aren't wearing that crown. Remember at the beginning, I said a bad leader is the person who's wearing the crown. Actually, the best leaders aren't wearing crowns, but they're switching between these 10 different hats that we've been talking about today. And what they're so skilled at doing is knowing which hat to wear when at exactly the time that each team member needs it. So those are some thoughts there on the different hats of leadership. And to give total credit, this podcast has been inspired by a gentleman that I follow on LinkedIn called Justin Wright, who talks a lot about servant leadership. So my invitation to you this week is really start being curious about which hats you are wearing in the workplace as a leader. And are there some that you feel more comfortable in than others? And maybe there's a hat you're not even using at all. And maybe you could try that on this week for the first time. Such a fun exercise to figure out which hat you're wearing, when you need to wear it. And this is, as I said, what makes leadership complex and actually quite difficult to teach, because everybody leads differently and we all have a different affinity for these different leadership hats. But it's really important that we understand where our strengths are and where the strengths are of our team members. And that's why on the 3rd of July, I'm going to be running a really interactive workshop. It's 4 hours, it's 3 to 7 p.m. on Thursday, the 3rd of July, and it is a free event. And what we're going to be doing there is looking at what is your energy for leadership. And I'm going to be doing that by unpacking the GC index, which measures your energy for impact and where you make the most difference in an organization, so that you can start focusing on the roles and the hats where you make the most impact within the business, and learn more about your colleagues and how they make their impact, because everyone's making their impact in a different way depending on the different hats they're wearing at different times. So I'd love it if you could join us. You'll find a link in the show notes to register for the event. Everyone's going to be taking the GC index, and during the workshop, we're going to be unpacking the results. It's going to be very interactive. We're going to be doing breakouts. We're going to be looking at anonymized data throughout the session so that you can really understand all about the energy within your business and how you need to adapt and change the different situations around you. And we're also going to look at the different energy of different activities that you do within the workplace, because that's really important too. Different activities actually requires you to think about different locations that we work in throughout the business. And I'm going to share a lot of that with you as well. If you really want to stop wasting your time doing things that don't serve you and really start to understand what does serve you and the team best, so that you're not wasting any time, energy and resources, then please do join us on the 3rd of July from 3 till 7 p.m. where we will be unleashing the game-changing potential in your team. As I said, the link's going to be in the show notes, so please do sign up, and I so look forward to seeing you then. But until next week, bye-bye. I hope you have an amazing week.